Voor de pauze duren. En na de pauze bent u de gelegenheid om vragen te stellen. Graag uw aandacht voor Gary Goldschneider.
I'm going to speak in English tonight because that's my language. And if you don't understand what I say, then I can say it in Dutch, and you can ask me questions in Dutch too. Yesterday I had no voice, so I'm going to leave it there because I'm going to use it by the piano. And then if I need the mic, I can take it out. That's perfect. Thanks. Yesterday I had no voice, so I woke up yesterday morning and I wasn't able to talk, but today I have a voice, so with this contraption I'll amplify the sound. Now I'm going to speak in English, but if you don't understand what I say, then you can ask me questions in Dutch, and I can answer them in Dutch. We're going to save the question period until the very end, because this is going to go on for some time. This is a big subject to cover, Western music, in one short period. So I'll talk for about 50 minutes or so, then we'll have a nice long break, and then we'll come back and I'll talk some more, and then at the end of that period, we'll have a discussion. However, at any point that you don't understand what I'm saying, you just raise your hand and talk, okay? Now, this is the Old Testament of Western music, and this is the New Testament of Western music. The Old Testament, maybe somebody could close the door. The Old Testament is the well-tempered clavier of Bach, the Wohltemperierter to clavier in 2 volumes, 48 preludes and fugues. The New Testament is the 32 sonatas of Beethoven. I first came to Holland in 1980, when was it, Bertha? 1984. No, 1983 I first came here, yeah. We got married in 1984. Oh, she's right, no, yeah. Well, anyway, whenever I came here, I sat on Leidseplane and I played these 32 Beethoven sonatas for 12 hours. And that was a wonderful day, it was a wonderful event. And so here I am tonight to talk about the Beethoven sonatas. I've given this lecture in many places in the world, in America, in New Zealand, at universities, at schools. I've given it once in Amsterdam, and that was for the music department at the University of Amsterdam, but not about astrology. Not about astrology. When I was in Wellington in New Zealand, I was invited by the department and I gave the theory of the keys in Western music, and then the kids knew that it was going to be some astrology in there. So they started screaming, astrology, astrology, and then I had to show them the theory astrologically. So because many of you are either astrologers or interested in astrology, I'm going to really give the talk tonight in terms of the 12 signs of the Zodiac, because it's of very great significance that we have 12 major keys and 12 minor keys, and we have 12 Zodiac signs. So what I'm going to do first is simply write down what the keys are, which are related to the signs. And if you want to copy this down, you can. I've written a book on the subject of about 300 pages, but unlike my book, The Secret Language of Birthdays, which incidentally now is in its 11th printing and has sold over 503,000 copies in the world. I get sick just thinking about it. This particular book has sold no copies because no publisher in the world will print it, because the theory is so far out that they can't. It's been rejected by Oxford University Press. It's been rejected by Faber and Faber. Penguin I haven't offered it to yet. Maybe after they publish my next book, then I'll say, look, why don't you do this one too? But at any rate, this is how I see the keys. I should mention that Scriabin had his own theory, Robert Schumann had his own theory, even Rousseau had his own theory, and there was a great debate between Rousseau and Voltaire at that time, and Rameau. They were all involved in it, as to whether a specific key had a specific quality. Rousseau said they did, and Rameau said they did not. And the anthroposophists have their own man who has his theory. Unfortunately, he's a bit mechanical. He says because G has 1 sharp and D has 2 sharps and A has 3 sharps, and he just gets an astrological sign there at the beginning and he just puts them in order as they go. Unfortunately, that is not the way the music got composed. But at any rate, from what I know of these works, and basically the entire literature of Western music from Monteverdi, 1600, until 1911, The Rite of Spring, this is how I think it works. The sign of Aries. Are you all familiar with the glyphs of astrology? Yeah? That is the Ram. The first sign, if I spell it wrong in Dutch, you'll understand, because I can't spell. I know it's not R-A-A-N, because that's the window. But anyway, Ram is A major. So in terms of Dutch, you know when I write major, that means groot, and the little one minor is klein, okay? A major and F sharp minor are the 2 keys that are related to the sign of Aries. The sign of Taurus is these are the springtime keys, the keys of F major and E major. Don't worry, I'm going to play you a lot of examples of all this on the piano. Don't get scared. Let me get scared, okay? Anyway, this is the key of Gemini, and so it is the key of G major and G minor, because these are the twins. This is the light side and this is the dark side, G major and G minor. Then we have the sign of Cancer, Kreeft. That is the deep feeling key of music. That's E minor and E flat minor. And then we have the sign of Leo, the blazing, radiant, golden key of music, which is E flat major. And then I'll write in the subsidiary keys later, because in some ways for example, if I write here G sharp minor, does anyone in this room know a single piece of music that's composed in G's groot? That's far out. Yeah, well, you know one, the old castle, the Vecchio Castillo, from the pictures at an exhibition of Mussorgsky. That's in G sharp minor. And you've all heard that piece, but yeah, who cares? Anyway, now we come to the key of Virgo, which is C major. That's a key you've all heard of. You've heard it all of your life. And then we come to, and I'll fill in some of the subsidiary keys as we go along. Then we have the Libra key, which is A flat major and F minor. With C major goes D flat major. And I'll make the point about how these 2 keys are related. They're related in a very practical way, which is pretty crazy when you think of C major with no sharps and flats, and D flat major with 5 flats. I mean, how could 2 keys be more distantly related? But they're very close. After all, they're only a half step apart. Okay, now we have the Scorpionic keys, which are D minor and the blackest key of music, C sharp minor. Then we have the Sagittarian keys, which are B flat major. And I'll write the subsidiary key in just a minute. Then we have the Capricorn keys, which are C minor and B major. And then we have the Aquarian keys, key of joy, D major, and F sharp major. And then we have the Pisces keys, which are B minor and B flat minor. So, now we have to just backtrack a little bit. And that is, yeah. The one that I left out here is, of course, A minor. Does anyone have any questions so far about this? Just think, whenever you see F major, you think F groot, E major, A groot, G minor, G klein. Okay? Does anyone have questions so far?
Paul,
Yeah.
I can't recognize any system here.
Oh, you can't recognize any system. Uh-huh. This is very interesting. Whatever made you think that life develops according to a system? Do you think the microbes read a textbook of microbiology before they divide? This is the point. If you read the Anthroposophist book, perhaps you would like that, because he simply writes them in a cycle of fifths, and he begins with C major, and he says that because C major is, for example, let's say Aries, that F major being the second one must be Taurus, etc., etc. The system in this is found here, is found here, is found in the Shostakovich Preludes and Fugues, is found in the Chopin Preludes, and I'm going to outline the system tonight. It's my system. If you don't like it, you can flush it down the toilet. But I agree with you. Looking at this, you might think, my God, this makes no sense. Where did the man get these from? Ah, that's what you're going to find out tonight. Okay, let's start with C major. You decide. Now, if we took that and we played 15 pieces in C major, and then after that we played about 150 more, and we looked at every single piece that was written in C major in Western music. We looked at the Schumann Toccata. We looked at the 41st Symphony of Mozart, the Jupiter Symphony. We looked at the last movement of the 5th Symphony of Beethoven, because they've always said all these years that Beethoven's 5th Symphony is in C minor. But you know, it doesn't have to be in C minor. It could be in C major, because the whole last movement is in C major. A good part of the second movement is in C major. A good part of the third movement is in C major, and a good part of the first movement is in C major. So I think before we even talk about what C major is, because you've just heard possibly the greatest single piece of Western music, the piece without which we wouldn't have the Beatles' music, we wouldn't have Cole Porter, we wouldn't have Miles Davis, we wouldn't have any of it without that little piece that you just heard, because it has all the harmony and all the chords in it that are used in those pieces. But we have to go back one step, and before we ask what G major and E flat major and C minor are, we have to ask a much more basic question, and that is, what do we mean by key, tonsort, in the first place? What is tone sort? Does somebody want to tell me what it is? Here, the gentleman who said the system doesn't make sense. What is key in the first place? I mean, to say this doesn't make sense presupposes that you know what key is. What is it?
I could not say it more easily in Dutch, I think.
Yes, say it in Dutch, sure.
De toonsoort is keuze van de componist die zich in een bepaalde toonhoogte thuis voelt.
Okay, the koza we can get rid of because the koza is involved in everything. So hoogte, and how do you handle the fact that in Mozart's time, A was different from the time, from the height where A was in Palestrina's time and different from where A was in Beethoven's time. How do you handle that?
Dat heeft met de stemmingen te maken.
Met de stemmingen te maken. But you said it was defined on the hoogte, so in fact the definition of it is going to change every time we tighten the string on the piano.
Ja.
Okay, does somebody else have an idea of what key is? We can get a dictionary, I can tell you what the definition is in every dictionary in the world, but I find that just as ridiculous.
So it has much more to do with the color of the...
Now you're getting down to it, but this is something that scientists have a great deal of trouble dealing with. If you look up the term in the dictionary, key will say the principal note on which a composition is built, or the principal scale, tone ladder, not tone sort, but tone ladder. What scale, for example, that something is written in the key of G means that it is based on the tone G, which is the most important tone, what the Middle Ages called the grundtone, what modal music is based on, essentially, like the Dorian mode is based on a principal tone, okay? Key, then, is a matter of what this gentleman said, perhaps where the tone is located, perhaps what the tone is, and what the scale is that's built on that. On the telephone, I had a definition, which was key is the signature of the piece. That means that it's in the key of G major or in the key of E minor. Okay, does anybody else have another definition? My definition lies very far afield of all of that. You know, when you go to a football game, a lot of the play is determined by what the terrain looks like, if the grass is in good shape. When I grew up as a kid, baseball games were played in different fields. The Brooklyn Dodgers played in Ebbets Field. This is baseball. Had a very short right field. So Goldschneider, who was left-handed, he would come up and try to hit a long fly ball, and then would be a home run. But if you tried the same thing in Comiskey Park, in Chicago, or in Polo Grounds, or in Yankee Stadium, or any of those fields, it would just be a fly out. When Shakespeare's plays were performed, they were performed at the Globe Theatre. If you know nothing about the structure of the Globe Theatre, you don't know very much about Shakespeare's plays. In other words, everything takes place somewhere, in a place, in a setting. A concert in Indonesia is very different from a concert in Africa. It's very different from a concert in India, where it might go on for 16 hours. I mean, me playing Beethoven sonatas for 12 hours on Leipzig plane is nothing unusual in India. They have concerts there going on all day and all night. In fact, the definition that I advance of key is the space, a musical space where the action of a composition takes place. And every one of the 24 musical spaces has its own shape, its own color, its own size, its own Möglichkeit. Some keys are very easy to play and to play in on certain instruments. Some keys are very difficult to play in on other instruments. For example, the harp is tuned in D flat because Erard, who invented the modern tuning for the harp, decided that's the way it was going to be tuned, and there are reasons for that. On the piano, C major we know is a very easy key because that's it. Or maybe Chico Marx would do it in that direction. The white keys. White keys, that means C major to most kids who play the piano. Well, if you have to play in C major on the French horn in a natural tuning, it might be more difficult or almost impossible. On the guitar, E major is a very natural key, as it is on the violin. But on the piano, E major is not such an easy key to play in. How do we know that? Well, Beethoven didn't write all his sonatas in E major, or B major, or F sharp major. He wrote one in F sharp major. He wrote none in B major. And he wrote one in E major. But they're not his greatest pieces. It's very difficult to write in the key of E major for the piano. Mozart rarely went beyond 1 sharp G major, 2 sharps D major, 3 sharps A major. After that, forget it. There's not a piano sonata in E major. It was too difficult for him. He was just wanted to write it down. And as far as minor keys are concerned, there are only 2 keys that are used by Mozart, principally. I'm speaking in general. If you look at the whole Kirkel listing, C minor and D minor. And the reason Mozart used those 2 keys was because they're the 2 most important minor keys that we have in Western music. To find a piece in C sharp minor is not so easy. Here, you find them all, because this is the Bible. This is where it all comes from. Bach had to write them all, and so did Chopin when he wrote his preludes, and so did Shostakovich when he wrote his preludes and fugues. Now, you and I could argue all night long about whether there's any system in this, and we could all say, well, to me, C major has more to do with Aries or Scorpio or whatever. To me, C major is the Virgo key. But one thing we could agree on, after we were up all night long and our eyes were red and we couldn't see anymore, and that is that C major does have a quality. That A major does have a quality. That G minor does have a quality. In and of itself. Now, where I got all my information from was from playing the great masterworks of music on the piano in concert for myself, teaching them for years. I'm familiar with the orchestral literature and what keys things are in. But to then draw from that, from all of that experience, what is true is one thing, and to get it by divine inspiration and say, in some world of ideas, a Platonic world, Plato, that there is an essential C majorness which is found in that piece. Bach discovered the essential C majorness of the cosmos when he wrote it down. I believe that too. But I'm not going to go that far. In the same way that when I wrote The Secret Language of Birthdays, first, I think, astrology book that aimed for a certain kind of thing with the public, and people have responded to it, I tried to take all of the thousands, the myriad of birthdays, and simply find what kinds of people were born on each day of the year. I did the same thing with the keys, that's all. And you're free to do the same thing yourself. Let's take the pieces in C major and see maybe what they have in common. I'll play a few examples, and you give me an idea. First of all, let's start with that little prelude. How would you describe the feeling of that prelude, the color, the tone, what does it convey to you, that little piece I just played? Je kan het ook zeggen in het Nederlands, maakt niet uit. Spaans, Frans, Chinees.
Helder, klaar.
Helder, klaar. Okay. Anything else?
Play. To play.
Playful. Okay. Anything else?
Niet te ingewikkeld, ja.
Ah, good. So we'll say simple, huh? Simple.
Eenvoudig.
Eenvoudig, okay. Eenvoudig. Okay, well, let's take those to start with. Here's a famous 4-note theme. You tell me what it is. Listen to it again. What is it? Come on, you're Europeans. I'm just a stupid American. This is the last movement of your most famous symphony, the Jupiter Symphony of Mozart. And you know, he worked all of his life to get these 4 notes. You can hear it in earlier compositions. Interesting, listen to the names of the notes. C, D, F, E. How many symphonies did Brahms write? Hoeveel symfonieën van Brahms? 4. En de toonsoorten zijn C klein, D groot, F groot, in order. A-klein. Waar? Yeah. Do you think that's a coincidence? Do you really think that's a coincidence? I mean, sorry, not good with microphones. Do you think that it's a coincidence that Bach was born in 1685 and died in 1750? That's Bach, huh? 6 years after he died, Mozart was born in 1756, and he died in 1791. 7 years after he died, Schubert was born. 1798, died in 1827. No, yeah, that's right, yeah. And 6 years after he died, Brahms was born in 1833, and he died just at the end of the century, how conveniently, 3 years before Nietzsche died in 1897. Now, you think that's just a coincidence? You want to talk about a plan? There's a plan for you. I think they were all the same person. I think they were all the same entity, the same Wesen, the same being. That Bach incarnated as Mozart, that Mozart incarnated as Schubert, and that Schubert incarnated as Brahms. And look at the dates. Look at the dates. How old was Bach when he died? 65. And how old was Brahms when he died? And where were they from? North Germany. This one and this one. Both very dour old men. One had a lot of children, the other didn't have any children at all. And look at the two guys in between. They were both Austrians. They were both young. They both died before the age of 40, and they were both the two greatest geniuses that we know in music, writing masterpieces before they were 15 years old. Now, maybe these kinds of things, that the fact that the Mozart 4 notes of the Jupiter Symphony and the 4 keys of the Brahms symphonies are the same, mean nothing to you. And maybe it means nothing to you that this little plan is there. As far as I know, before I pointed it out, I never read it anywhere. But I see these things. I feel them. I somehow feel that there is a much greater significance to music. I'm not speaking about art. I know nothing about that. Literature I know a lot about. But that's another area. That's another completely different area. But music is by its very nature symbolic. Do you see that cross there? Think of the Matthew Passion of Bach. You hear it every spring, don't you? The Matthäus Passion? What key does it start in? What key is that opening in? Nobody knows. People hear these pieces, they never look at the music. Why not? Music is a secret language. It's only available to musicians. That's nonsense. That's what the church tried to teach before Martin Luther came along. Anybody can read music. It's the simplest thing in the world. This is the cross. There it is. That's why Bach began the Matthew Passion in E minor. If you don't believe me, read Albert Schweitzer. Did you ever hear of him? Albert Schweitzer wrote that everything in Bach is symbolic. Everything in the world is a symbol. You are all symbols. This building is a symbol for the mind of God. I mean, this is the Cosmos of Kring, isn't it? What key does the Matthew Passion end in? C minor. And how many flats in C minor? And is it too hard to figure out that the end of the Matthew Passion is symbolized by the Trinity? I mean, is that a difficult concept? Music is filled with symbolism. There's a man here in Holland, he's Dutch. He wrote an entire book this thick on Johann Sebastian Bach's birthday, which was March 21st, 1685. And he showed that that number keeps on showing up in everything Bach ever wrote. Of course it did. Bach believed in astrology. Beethoven believed in astrology. Even Isaac Newton believed in astrology. May his soul rest in peace. He was basically an astrologer. I mean, he wrote the laws of motion, true. It's because people thought that way. They thought astrologically. And thank God, they're coming to think more astrologically today. And all that means is in terms of cycles. Those of us who are astrologers, we think in terms of cycles, okay? At any rate, here are some characteristics of the key of C major. Now, if you heard those 4 notes of the Jupiter Symphony, could never imagine anything more pure than that, more simple than that, more open than that. So to me, C major is Virgo, because to me, Virgo is the sign which exemplifies all of those traits. But don't get the idea that C major is an easy key. Easy is a term that musicians reserve for G major. G major is really the playful, easy key of music. And we start piano students often with pieces that are in G major rather than C major. C major is also not only a very helder, very clear and very pure key, but it's also the mightiest key of music too. I mean, C major is... Okay, C major. You can't get much bigger than that in music, unless you go to Richard Strauss. It started with Monteverdi, the idea of key, and it lived. It was a tradition. It's like a Roya Drad. And when you take the Roya Drad of C major, and the Roya Drad of E minor, and the Roya Drad of F sharp major, and the Roya Drad of G minor, and you weave them together, you get a carpet. And that carpet is what Western music is. Without the keys, we have nothing. So it's very important to understand the notion of key first. What the professors teach you is major, minor. That's it. That's all they'll admit. All the major keys are the same, all the minor keys are the same. Scriabin didn't believe that, Robert Schumann didn't believe it, Bach didn't believe it, Mozart didn't believe it, but the goddamn music teachers believe it. The musicologists believe it. Why? I mean, C major, does it matter? I mean, we play it here on the piano, we tune the piano higher. How could C major be the same when the keys were actually changing pitch? That's the whole point. Why did Bach write the Well-Tempered Clavier? Because he knew that a new tuning was coming into being that would erase the individual characteristics of the keys. In other words, before Bach wrote the Well-Tempered Clavier, and perhaps 50 years before that, everything was tuned in a natural tuning. That means that if this piano was tuned in a natural tuning relative to C major, if I played in D flat, it would sound even worse than it does now. I mean, it would sound so bad, because all of our scales are based on whole steps and half steps. Well-tempered tuning meant that every half step, every increment, every small amount, every inch, every centimeter, whatever you want to call it, the distances were all going to be exactly the same. But you know, originally they weren't the same. So when a French horn player, or a horn player, played in the key of F, he took out his F crook and he stuck it into the instrument, and then when they played a piece in A major, he took it out and put in his A crook. But when the modern instruments were made, they were made in such a way that every half step was equal, or practically equal, and therefore it didn't matter what key you played in. So the professors thought, super far out, we have major and we have minor. But it's not true, because music grew out of a tradition where first there was established a feeling about each one of these particular keys, and Bach knew what that was. He wrote it down in the well-tempered clavier because he was afraid it was going to get lost. So a little later in the second half, I'll take 4 preludes or 4 fugues or whatever you want and play a little bit of them for you, and you tell me whether all major pieces are the same and all minor pieces are the same. You know what they tell us? Major is happy and minor is sad. God, that's profound. It makes me want to cry when I hear that, you know? Majors, and that bullshit has been circulating now for over 200 years, and people believe that. Now, you can get very sad in a major key. Very sad. You can also get very weird. You know the opening of the Dissonant Quartet of Mozart? That piece is in C major. It sounds like Arnold Schoenberg, the first 8 bars. Even the first symphony of Beethoven starts with that very strange introduction, a little bit rambling, and then he really gets into it. C major has a lot of possibilities into it. It can flip over into the sharp side, it can flip over into the flat side very easily. So we take Beethoven, or that's another Beethoven C major opening, or Mozart, or the Richard Strauss. How about Schubert? Does Schubert write anything in C major? Not much, but he did write this. Fantasy of Schubert, and the last movement starts like this, the fugue. What an amazing theme. But that opening is so C major, believe me, it couldn't be in the key of A flat major, which is usually more like this. You know that one? It's like we're in church. Pretty big difference. Mozart didn't write a first movement in A flat major. Beethoven wrote a couple. But they have a richness, they have a deepness. To me, they have an orange color, okay? But we won't get into that. Scriabin had his whole theory of colors. But it is not the pure... So then the professors scream, they say, okay, this is C major. They say, then what's this? Then what's this? How about that, Goldschneider? And what I say is, of course, they're at a different level, you know, and we could tune the piano and they would be even more different, and yet the quality of C majorness still comes out. Now, if I'm right about this, it is just possible that every performance by Bernard Haitink, every performance by Arturo Toscanini, every performance by Arthur Schnabel, every performance by Riccardo Muti is wrong. Because if they're conducting C major pieces as if they were in A flat, or D minor pieces as if they were in G minor, then they've missed the whole point. But who cares? They're all making millions anyway. I mean, what difference does it make? It's only Mozart and he's dead anyway, right? Well, if you think Mozart's dead, you have another thing coming. A spirit like that can't die. A spirit like that was never born. It always was. It's an essential part of what we consider the human experience. But at any rate, I think this kind of thing should be taught more in music schools. Very simply, what is the characteristic of C major? And then perhaps we can approach that theme of Mozart. Should it be played? Or should it be played? What is the nature of C major? Is it measured? Well, how about the first fugue of Bach? except insensitive ones have ever played that. And there are reasons for it, because it's so difficult that later on in the piece you'd probably screw up. Anyway, every piece kind of dictates its own tempo, its own dynamic. You know that all of Bach's music, virtually, as we have it, was written without tempo markings and without any indication about how it should be played. Bach was much too busy. They did an experiment a few years ago where they had someone sit down and try to write out all the music of Bach. And they computed that if someone sat day and night writing as fast as he could not physically write all the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. And when did he compose it? And when did he feed his children? And when did he teach Greek to those stupid kids who had coughs and sneezes all the time? When did he live? Didn't he go to the bathroom? Didn't he sleep? A man writing all day and all night could not physically write out the works of Johann Sebastian Bach. Interesting, huh? So in other words, it's a miracle. Well, it's all a miracle. Don't ever try to explain it. Maybe we can get some kind of insight into it, but it's sure not going to make sense. The way a box of Lego makes sense. But somehow, through all of these strange meanderings, these strange turnings, these accidental things, the fire in Brahms's house, when the first symphony was about to burn up, and the housekeeper ran in and grabbed it and dragged it out. He had worked 26 years on it. He was just standing there watching the house burn. He didn't give a shit. This is Brahms, very strange man. At the end of his life, he used to sit in the other room while his friends played his music and talked. And he would open the door just slightly while he was sitting there in the dark. He became a mystic at the end of his life. And if you hear those late piano works, you begin to understand it. So C major, in a sense, is our rock. The beginning of the Well-Tempered Clavier is C major. The first piece in the Shostakovich Preludes and Fugues is C major. The first prelude of Chopin is C major. Now, these weren't people who wrote essays on the subject. Musicians are stupid. Many of them can't even walk. They can't talk. But boy, they can play their music. They can write their music. Bach did not write essays on his music. Very few musicians did. Robert Schumann wrote on music, and Richard Wagner wrote on music, and not too many other people did. But do you think it's just coincidence that he begins the gateway key, it's often called? Oh, the academicians will give us that, the gateway key. It's the great arch. Well, they need to sell a book, you know, with at least one creative idea, so they call C major the gateway key. It's the beginning. So astrologically, it doesn't make sense to begin with Virgo, although the academic year begins there in the fall, and the Jews begin their year with the fall. So we could make a case for the fall being the beginning of the year. But C major is the beginning of all things in music. Let's look at a couple of other keys so that we can, you know, move along, because we have a lot of ground to cover. Let's take a couple of other major keys, and then we'll look at a couple of minor keys. Let's look at the springtime keys, F major and E major, the ones that I wrote down for Taurus. Here's F major. For me, the Italian concerto has that feeling. But let's look at the Beethoven Pastoral Symphony. How does that one open up? And what key is that written in? And the Spring Sonata of Beethoven. You know, it's not good. But let's take this. This one you know. F major. Pastoral Symphony, F major. The Spring Sonata of Beethoven, F major. Vivaldi's The Seasons. The season, spring, primavera, opens in the key of E major. It's in 4 sharps. It's in E major. Like the Bach Violin Concerto. And the Bach Piano Concerto, also one of the harpsichord concertos, is in E major. And also the great sonata of Beethoven, the Opus 109, which with the tremendous set of variations at the end, but this one. So my feeling is that when Beethoven was in the springtime mood, when he wanted to express that green, verdant feeling, that fresh, new feeling, he wrote this. And the great theme from the last movement, on which he wrote the variations. Composer was Handel. And tell me what you think. They sure have something in common. And all I'm trying to do is give it a name to describe it. Because they're 12 major and 12 minor, I fitted one. I think the first one that I thought of was C major seemed very Virgo-like, for the reasons you said, because it's simple and it's clear and it's straightforward and all of those things. Not easy. G major is more easy. But yeah, once I heard that, then I started to hear other things too. Now let's look for a minute at the minor keys, just for a second. Two principal keys in classical music have been used. Now, I'm not speaking from theory. If there were another music professor or teacher here, and I've given this at enough places to know in London, they can contradict it because it's true. D minor and C minor are the keys that are most used in Western music. As a matter of fact, if you took all the other pieces that weren't written in C minor and D minor away, you would still have a lot of great music. What are some of the pieces written in D minor and C minor?
D minor?
Yeah.
Ninth Symphony?
Ninth Symphony of Beethoven. You know, in the same way that I would argue that the Fifth Symphony could be conceived of in C major, I could also argue that the Ninth Symphony was in the key of D major, because the whole last movement is in D major. Here we go again, here we go again. I think the Ninth Symphony is written in D major, D minor land. I think the Brahms Violin Concerto is written in D major, D minor land, particularly the first movement. And the Fifth Symphony is written in sort of C major, C minor land. But in fact, the D minorness of the Ninth Symphony is undeniable, particularly the second movement. That is what D minor is about. D minor is demonic. D minor is devilish. D minor is destructive. D minor is Dionysian. Get the picture? It's the wild, raging, sexual, passionate key of music, D minor. And that means when Beethoven wanted to be that way, there was only one key he could pick, and that was D minor. That was the key that was available to him. What did Beethoven write in D minor for the piano? Only one sonata. It's a very dynamic key. It moves. Yeah.
To interrupt you, maybe it's interesting when you tell also, we don't have to list it, the astrological signs, so this...
Scorpio. Scorpio. D minor is the Scorpionic key. Last time I gave my lecture here, I went like this. They said, won't you come back again next year? That's why I'm here. I played that. Stupid, isn't it? Here I'm losing my voice, too. But this is kinetic in music. Kinetic, I mean, it doesn't stop. It's busy. No rest. Geen rust. You should talk when I play. Could also say, look, you played the last movement, you played the fugue. What about the other parts of the piece? Well, listen to the opening. Scorpionic Key, the chromatic fantasy and fugue. Etc. And it gets wilder and wilder and wilder. The chaconne, D minor. Should be played on the violin, but not by Alphonse. As we say in English, if he had a brain in his head, he'd be dangerous. I mean, you have to have at least a 50 IQ to play this piece. There are only a couple of people who are capable of really playing that well on the violin. I had heard Heifetz played it. I had heard Szigeti play it fantastically well. And then I heard this kid Maxim Vengerov play it, and I really fell over. It was absolutely magnificent at the Concertgebouw a couple of years ago. But D minor is a wild key in Bach, and it's a wild key in Beethoven, and it's a wild key in Mahler, certainly, and in Robert Schumann as well. And it's used for very kinetic kinds of movement in Brahms. Brahms didn't use the key of D minor a lot, but when he used it, like in the violin and piano sonata or in this concerto, it was of that type. So we have the big keys, minor keys. D minor, D klein, C minor, C klein. And C minor symbolizes exactly the opposite. D minor is the key of Scorpio, C minor is the key of Capricorn. It is the key of drama. It's a static key. It's not a moving key. It's not a dynamic key. It's a key that sits very heavily wherever it is. It can go fast, it can go slow, but I would call it the key of fate. D minor is the key of wildness. C minor is the key of fate. That's fate knocking on the door. Now you could conduct it fast, like Toscanini. Remember that. I'm not Victor Borgia. Remember that. Anyway. But then when we look at, for example, Beethoven's third piano concerto is in C minor, listening to the opening theme. That's C minor, not D minor. D minor is this one. C minor, once you hear that opening, it's nothing you can argue against. You try to argue against that, you're going to be flat as a pancake. Mozart just happened to write one of his 27 piano concertos in C minor. Only one. Well, he only wrote two in minor keys. One is in C minor, and the other is in D minor. One is in C minor, the other is in D minor. Alfred Einstein, not Albert Einstein, but Alfred Einstein, who's the greatest musicologist who ever lived, said, if you understand the Mozart 27 piano concertos, you understand music. To him, they were the high point. Only two in minor keys. One in C minor, one in D minor. How does the Mozart C minor concerto open? A little bit mysterious, wouldn't you say? Now, Beethoven was underneath Mozart, like Muhammad Ali was under, you get the picture? Joe Louis. I mean, when Muhammad Ali came along, he had a lot to live up to. Beethoven had an impossibility to live up to. He had to, in a sense, surmount the greatest musician he or anybody else had ever heard of, with the possible exception of Bach and about 10 others. But how was he going to get over that? Well, he took this, and he changed it to, and he changed the mood from this to, what he's saying there is, Mozart, up yours, you know? This is me. I'm Beethoven. I'm not you. This was a reply, I believe, an answer to what Mozart had said before. But Mozart wrote a piano sonata, unfortunately, for Beethoven that started like this. Need I repeat those first three notes? So Beethoven didn't have very far to look for that opening. There were some keys that Mozart owned in his gut so much that Beethoven couldn't write in them. He was paralyzed. What did Beethoven write in the key of A major, one of the greatest keys in music? He wrote the Seventh Symphony. Jesus Christ, what an effort that was. That fury is, I can write in A major. I can do it, what Mozart did before. Mozart owned A major and Schubert owned A major. And between the two of them, they wrote in A major like nobody else did. A was for Amadeus. That was his name. He owned that key because that's what he was called. You can make an argument for B flat, which I call the Sagittarian key, and Beethoven was a Sagittarius, being the key that Beethoven owned. If Mozart owned A, Beethoven owned Beth. Yeah? But the A of Mozart was very different from the A of Beethoven. Childlike key of music. It's Aries. It's the child. It's the kid. It's everything that's playful and everything that's childlike and everything that's kind of before they teach you that this is the way things really are kind of thing. So Beethoven wrote the Kreutzer Sonata. Well, we say it's in A minor, but it's really in A major. That one. But he couldn't get close to Mozart in the Prague Symphony. He couldn't even get close to... That's an A minor, but then the theme comes in. Now to me, because A major is Aries and A minor is Sagittarius, it begins with Sagittarius. There are other great pieces that Mozart wrote in A major too, like the 29th Symphony, which is one of the all-time greats, I think. And Beethoven had trouble with that key, so in a sense he substituted D major for it. Well, there he had a problem too, because Mozart had written quite a number of pieces in D major too. Let's get back to the minors. C minor, the key of fate, therefore Saturn, therefore Capricorn, the dramatic key of music, the key of drama, and D minor, the key of wildness, the dithyrambic, Dionysian, wild key of music in Nietzschean terms. So if Bach is writing in C minor, he's doing this. This is a C minor theme. Do you know this one? Passacaglia. And then he writes variations, 21 of them, because he's born on the 21st. Huh? That's what the man who wrote the book said. That's what he does with C minor, and that's what he does with D minor. Now let's pose an interpretive problem. I'm a pianist. I want to learn the C minor Prelude and Fugue by Bach. How does it go? Well, listen to most recordings. It goes like this. mixed up. They think C minor is D minor. That's not C minor, that's D minor. C minor is... That's how I play it. That's how I hear it. And the fugue is not... That sounds like a cripple trying to run. And it's... C minor is heavy, like a woman who's pregnant. It's gravid. It pulls you down to the ground. I mean, C minor immobilizes you to the point where you almost can't move. You can't even speak. D minor frees you, but it sets you so loose that the kinetic energy is flying all over the place. So look at Mahler. He was well out of the tradition. Mahler, what did he have to do with the well-tempered clavier? Do you remember the ending of the second movement, the first movement of the Resurrection Symphony? How it ends, that first movement? That's a C minor ending, man. That's heavy. When that hits you on the head, it's like, wow, Jesus. But if you listen to Mahler's D minor symphony, you hear something very different, really, really different. So let's say, if we take a break now, because I've been rattling on for over an hour, we'll take a nice long break, and then we'll come back, and I'll run through the other keys and answer any questions. Okay? Yeah. Mijn vrouw staat helemaal fout en dat, ze spreekt alleen Engels tegen mij. Hè? Daarom is mijn Nederlands zo slecht. Mijn kinderen spreken heel keurig Nederlands. Eentje op de Koninklijke Conservatorium Den Haag, andere hier in de Berlage-school in de Bijp en andere in de Europese school in Bergen. Ik heb veel kinderen, hoor, 7. En ze heeft 2. Samen hebben wij 9.
Hello.
Maar in ieder geval, maar in ieder geval, ik ben een goede Nederlander. In ieder geval, wat ik doe nu, en dat is echt voorstel van David en het is fantastisch. Ik spreek niet. Ik alleen doe zo, ik stel mijn vinger op de rand, dan zit ik bij de piano en speel een beetje in A groot. Ja? En dan de volgende. Ik ga een beetje door. Ja? Oké.
This is the Bible.
Spring, en wat staat daar? Spring?
Nurturing, growth, and the vortex. And that is the een beetje meer in de grond en de andere is een beetje meer puur, een beetje meer kinderlijk. Nu, de derde is Gemini, natuurlijk, tweeling. Dat heeft twee kanten. Dat is de G groot en de G klein. En de andere twee, bijvoorbeeld F major, F groot. Bijvoorbeeld A groot. Je hebt vies klein. Ieder heeft een meer belangrijk toonsoort en een minder belangrijk. En bij minder belangrijk bedoel ik minder gebruikt. Zo A is veel gebruikt, A klein, en vies small is niet zo veel gebruikt. Bijna niets in comparison met de ander. In F groot en E groot, ze zijn allemaal belangrijk. Maar E groot was meer belangrijk in de barok en F groot was meer belangrijk in de klassiek. En er zijn redenen voor. En je kan ook in connecties zien, ze zijn een half stap apart. En misschien dat heeft iets mee te maken. Zoals in Virgo, maar dat heeft C en Des. Zijn ook in dezelfde relatie. Of E en S in de kreeft. Of C en B in de steenbok. Ja. Of ook in de boogschutter. De Bes en de A. Ze zijn ook in een half step relatie. Oké, zo. G is meer zoals je hoort. Zo die is de... Dat is de klein. G klein, dat is de mineur. En de andere is de groot. Nu, ik speel het begin van een stukje dat heet de Goldberg Variations. En dat is echt de essentie van G groot. En dat is Bach. Dat is die thema. Bijvoorbeeld de eerste variation, je kan het zo spelen. Dat is een soort elefantisch, olifantisch. Dat is olifantisch. En het was jarenlang zo gespeeld. En dan kwam Glenn Gould, de gekke Canadiaan, en hij speelde het zo. Voor mij, de tweede is beter, omdat het is tweeling. Tweeling is spelvol, snel. Als je hebt niks snel in tweeling, heb je geen tweeling. Zoals je zo doet. Maar het was zo gespeeld jarenlang. Zo Glenn Gould. En het is niet serieus. Het is helemaal niet serieus. Goldberg Variations, jeetje. Ieder is alles een baksteen in je hoofd. Zo diep, zo diep. Nu ben ik Hans Liebert. Maar het is misschien meer zoals de Fool in de tarot. Huh? Het is naar, het is off. Het is allemaal licht. En er is alleen één van de variations dat in de mineur is. De 3. Maar de belangrijkste is de... Niet die, is en dan hoor je echt de verschil tussen de ene kant van de Gemini en de andere kant van de Gemini. En je kan veel doen met Mozart bijvoorbeeld en met Schubert. Schubert was misschien de meest belangrijk in de... Wat je doet in de major, je doet in de volgende keer in de mineur. En je hoort een enorm verschil in de thema's van Schubert tussen wat groot is en wat klein is. Maar in ieder geval, wij gaan verder naar de kreeft. Wij gaan weer door, maar ik ga alleen één keer door. Kreeft, dat is alles dat binnen is. Alles dat gevoelig is. En ook, het is de eerste van de tekens dat echt geestelijk, ook in dezelfde manier. Zo het begin van de Matthäus Passion in E klein. Maar als wij spreken over wat empathisch is of sympathetisch is, dan hebben wij E klein. En zoiets. Chopin. Gevoelig, sympathetisch, innerlijk, pijnvol, echt veel pijn, soulful. Het gaat over en over dezelfde toon. Dat alles dat klein is hetzelfde. Die is hetzelfde van dat is steenbok. Die is tegenover steenbok is kreeft. Voor mij wat dat doet is in het Engels you have feeling.
Je hebt D in Scorpion staan. D zeg je toch? Die minor?
Nee, ik zeg het is niet die minor, het is niet D klein. Maar het is wel water, het is wel een soort gevoel van water, maar een andere soort. Bijvoorbeeld in het Engels, the ocean is a sea of feeling. And the moon rising from the ocean is an emotion. That's the difference to me. Verschil tussen gevoelens en emotie. Gevoelens is de grote zee van alles. Diep, vol, veranderlijk. En uit van de zee, wat komt uit, is de essentie. Dat is de kardinaal, de pure vorm van water is de maan. Zo de maan in relatie tot de water is zoals emotie, één emotie in relatie tot gevoelens. In het algemeen. Zo, als je wil, in de Chopin, dat is de water, dat is de zee. En die melodie is de emotie. Dat is de maan. De maan in de rechterhand en de water in de linkerhand. Maar het is interessant nu te kijken over Bach en de andere toonsoort, die S klein. Nooit gebruikt, bijna nooit in de muziek, maar één keer in Bach is een van de mooiste en meest expressief. Kijk even, wat is hier? Die is kreeft ook. beschrijving van de maan als hij opgaat. En als je... Er is iets ook, dat komt misschien van die wereld. So, de vijfde nu is Leo, en dat is S groot. En als je hoort S groot, en als je luistert aan S groot, je hebt een instrument. En een instrument, voor iedere toonsoort is er een instrument. Misschien klarinet voor de A. En misschien voor iedereen, voor E is de viool, voor C is de piano, maar voor S is de French horn. So je hebt de vijfde symfonie van Sibelius, laatste deel. Er is alleen 2 horns. Of het begin van Wagner, van Das Rheingold, gold. Het is echt de goldene toonsoort. En in Beethoven, Emperor Piano Concerto. Begint ook met de grote soort gevoel van S. Zo, als Bach doet iets met S, hier in de voltempererte klavier, hij doet zo. Gaat te ver. And a richness in that music that is, to me, the essence of that key of E flat. Now we go to Virgo, and we covered already C major, a number of examples. Interesting, Des. What C major was to the classical period, D flat major was to the Romantic period. So you have Liszt. It was as if he was writing in C major, but it's in D flat. D flat was not a key that Bach wrote wrote in. It wasn't a key that Mozart wrote in. So you may say they are the two greatest composers, but they missed out on one major key. But Chopin and Liszt and many other Romantic composers wrote a lot in D flat because the sonority of the piano is absolutely fantastic in this key. So Robert Schumann wrote the toccata originally in D flat major, but it was so difficult no one could play it. So he transposed it to C, this one. And imagine that goes on for about 12 minutes. In C major, you can barely play it, but in D flat, it's impossible. Then we go to the key of A flat, which is Libra. A flat is evenwicht. Moet zijn. Libra, de weegschaal is evenwicht. So als je hebt bijvoorbeeld D van Beethoven. Alles in dit stuk spreekt over evenwicht. Het is bijna onmogelijk een snel stuk in as te schrijven. Kan niet. Chopin ook heeft veel in de key geschreven. Liszt heeft ook veel in de key, bijvoorbeeld. De Liebestraum, dat is ook in as. Zo as en des zijn toonsoorten dat zijn heel rijk en kleurvol. Bijzonder voor de romantisch. Veel op de zwarte tasten en niet zoveel op de witte. So then we go to two really important keys. A flat is not so important. F minor in a way is more important. De tweede toonsoort van weegschaal. De F klein. Dat is de toonsoort van. Is the key of balance, evenwicht. Dan F klein is the key van onevenwicht, unbalanced. Huh? So everything that is balanced in A flat is unbalanced in F minor, and that's the relation of those two keys. Anyway, moving on to Scorpio. I mentioned D minor a lot, but C sharp minor, we only have about 5 famous pieces written in C sharp minor. You know them all because they're all so great. One is the great late string quartet of Beethoven. Another is the Moonlight Sonata. Another one is the Prelude in C sharp minor of Rachmaninoff. And if you're a Scorpio, you hear those opening notes, you know it. I mean, this is Scorpio. It's black as night. That's Rachmaninoff. Where did he get it from? Obviously. Black as night. They called it the Moonlight Sonata. Black, this piece is dark. And the last movement is fast, but it's still in C sharp minor. The Mahler Symphony. Remember the opening of the Mahler Symphony? Number 5. How does it begin? That great trumpet solo? Whatever it is, you know. I can't play it on the piano, but that crazy opening. And he managed to do the whole first movement Mahler did in C sharp minor, but the rest of it goes then into other keys. It was very hard for him to do that. The Bach fugue in C sharp minor is this one. 4 notes. Listen to it again. That's the whole theme of the fugue. You want to hear a little bit of the fugue? It's so fantastic. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
It's an amazing piece. It's all based on 4 notes, but he uses actually 3 different themes in it, and it's written in 5 voices. 5 voices on the piano. You have to play 5 different parts at the same time. Listen to this. I haven't played the piano in a year, I swear to you. That's why I'm enjoying myself tonight. So you have 2 sides of Scorpio. One is this side, that's the moving Scorpio, the dynamic Scorpio, and the other one is the deadly side. Don't disturb this. Did you ever wake a Scorpio in the middle of a sleep? Never do that again. I did it one time. I was almost dead, I can tell you. My friend, he was a Scorpio. We were in Austria together. He was asleep, and it was time for him to get up, and he was not getting up because they're very slow waking up. They have to drink many cups of coffee. And he's in his bed, and I say, Arnie, it's time to get up. And he wouldn't move, and I'm a Gemini. I took the covers and I ripped them off of this sleeping Scorpio. The next thing I knew, I was pinned against the wall. These eyeballs were glaring into my eyes. I was slowly being choked to death. And I was also 2 feet off the ground. I said, Arnie, it's me, it's your friend. Gary, it's Gary. He went, like that. And then he went back to sleep. And the motto of this story is, never wake a sleeping Scorpio. So when you hear this, don't make any noise. So anyway, then we move on to Sagittarius. And the Volksschooter is ook heel dynamisch, maar for mij it is Bes, and Bes is the key of the river. I call it the key of the river. Because pieces in classical music that are in B flat, they flow and they don't stop, like this. So, for example, if you hear this. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. And then you hear. And for me, that has a lot to do with Sagittarius. One side of Sagittarius, but the other side of Sagittarius is the alkaline. And alkaline, A minor, is the most unstable key in music. It's that crazy side of Sagittarius. You know, that side you can't, they're just so crazy. That's the only way you can possibly describe it. And A minor is a very crazy key in music. I'll play you the fugue. You'll see exactly what I mean. The fugue from the second book of the Well-Tempered Clavier. If this is insanity in music, this is instability. It's again a 4-note theme, but just listen what he does here. It's only 29 bars long. Krause gaan, zowel als in de molen. And it doesn't live in the sharps, it doesn't live in the flats, it's in some very unstable position in between. And pieces in A minor are always doing chromatic things. And then we come to stability and structure and order in the cosmos and in music, and that is Capricorn. Thank God for the Capricorns. Every child should have one Capricorn parent, but not two. I had two. I had two Capricorn parents. They were both born on the same day of the same year at the same moment. My parents. And I was their only child. An astrologer's nightmare, I might say. So their son became an astrologer. That's fantastic, huh? The 1st of January 1913 and the 1st of January 1913. Sam and Rose. They were the same person. Sam was Rose and Rose was Sam. It's terrible. And I was just failing. This was me. This was them. It's very hard. That's how I got so screwed up. So, if I were playing this first, als ik speelde this eerste prelude in concert, misschien het klinkt raar, maar voor mij het is heel structureel en soulful. Oh, die. Then we go from that can you imagine to go from the somber, serious world of Capricorn to the world of Aquarius? Aquarius. De toonsoort van vruchten, van de vruchten. The key of joy. Day groot. Or, ever hear this one? Not, but. So when you have Handel doing this, and he shall, and he shall, and then you heard the end of the Mahler First Symphony. But it's joy. And if you want to hear a joyful movement, listen to the last movement of the Brahms Second Symphony. Mozart. It's the idiot key. D major, without that we wouldn't have anything in music. That's joy. So what does Bach do with D major? Well, I mean, for him it's the key of triumph. It's even more than joy. He did in the remember the B minor Mass, the Ha-Moll Messe. It's mostly in Ha-Moll, but the major parts are in D. So you have the Gloria. That's joy, you know? So he does this in this fugue. Finally, the last one, Pisces. Deep, profound. If Cancer is the ocean, Pisces is the floor of the ocean. It's as deep as you can get. So themes in B minor, they start in the bass, like this one. Now that's quite an opening, huh? For how old was he when I wrote that? About 24, 25, Schubert. Very profound piece, very deep. And then you look at Shostakovich, Preludes and Fugues, and his fugue in B minor begins. Exactly in the same register as Schubert too. Chopin's Prelude in B minor begins in the bass. It could be played by a cello. From the A-klein prelude. Dat is de kreeft. D is de vis. Misschien is the quicker moving notes, maybe, that makes it more fish-like. Also the opening of the B minor Mass, the Kyrie. There is a movement there, but it's very deep also. And then finally B flat minor. Yeah, Chopin wrote a great sonata in B flat minor. Of course there's a prelude and fugue here. I wrote a piece that goes like this. To the French chanson, but B flat minor, that was the key it had to be in. I mean, when Mozart had the Jupiter feeling, when he had the feeling to write that great Jupiter symphony, C major was there. There is no other key that piece could have been written in. And the same with the Beethoven Fifth and all great pieces of music. I think when the feeling came over them and they were in the mood to write that kind of music, then they had to pick the key. So, now we're going to get to questions. So we've quickly gone through the keys, and in the part before I gave you a bit of my feeling of why the keys are that way. So now we just have questions. Yeah.
So why is it called Jupiter? Because you connect Sagittarius not with C major,
but with B flat. Yeah, I think it's not. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why it was called Jupiter. He didn't call it Jupiter. Some critic called it Jupiter. What would you call it? I don't know.
No, I don't know. It makes a difference if he didn't call it that. I didn't want.
Most of the composers didn't name their pieces anything. They were not literary people. When I tell you that Schumann and Wagner were the only ones who wrote about music, I mean it. I mean, if Bach had even written one essay on playing the piano, or Mozart, God love him, if he had written a page on what Don Giovanni was about, wouldn't that be wonderful? But it's all a secret language. It is a secret language, and the only way you can decipher it is not like this or like this, but through the music. You have to live in the spirit of that music. Then maybe you begin to understand it a little bit. But come on, I'm sure you have some questions.
Did you started with,
this time I started with the...
You started with Star Wars, why not with Aries?
No, I did start with Aries. I started with the Ram. That was the A major. The very first one that I played was a...
Very short.
Yeah, very short. It's a very hard key. That's why it was very short. It's the hardest key to play on the piano. It's impossible.
What do you mean with sharp?
What do I mean with sharp? Kraus.
Kraus.
Weet je wel eens een kraus? Ja, niet de andere kraus, dat is iets anders. Maar kraus zoals die. Wij hebben krausen en molen.
Ja.
En bijvoorbeeld als je speelt in toonsoort zoals, in een toonsoort zoals C, de toonladder C, geen kraus, geen mol, geen probleem. Maar als je speelt G, moet je één kraus inzetten. Dat is vies. Ja, vies is de kraus. De kraus. Een vies kraus, oké. Dan wij gaan naar de tweede, dat is twee krausen, ja? Dat is D, twee krausen. Dan A, dat is 3. Dan E, dat is 4. Ja, dan D, dat is 5. Dan vies, dat is 6. Maar vies is hetzelfde als ges. Ges is 6 molen. Dan ga je verder met de molen. je doet één groot cirkel omheen met de 12 toonsoorten. En ik kan oren over dat spreken hoor. Maar dat heeft niets mee te maken.
Ja. Sharp, is het niet dat een kruis is niet dat het de noot met een halve toon verhoogt? Ja.
Dat is de enige dat het bedoelt aan een muzikus is niet, het heeft niets met zwarte tasten mee te maken, maar alleen het is instructie. Muzikus verhoogt de toon E tot F bijvoorbeeld.
En mol is het andersom, het is nou lager.
Precies. Maar het is wel een instructie aan de muzikus zo te doen en zo te spelen, maar het heeft ook een fantastische betekenis in het zelf. Eén kruis is de kruis voor Jezus. Dat is het begin van de Matthew Passion. En ook de eind, de 3 molen, dat is de Trinity. Hoe zeg je Trinity?
Drie kruisen.
Drie eenheid. Precies, de drie eenheid. Dat is de eind. Zo alles is symbolisch in muziek. Iedere nummer, iedere noot, A, B, C. Bijvoorbeeld Bach. Hij heeft veel stukjes geschreven op zijn naam. Zijn naam is B, A, C, H. H, dat is in het Duits B. Best is in het Duits B. Als je dat begrijpt, heb je B, A, C, H. Zo, bijvoorbeeld een chromatic fantasy fugue. Begint met de veertonen van Bach's naam. A, B, H, C. Dat is geen toeval. De man heeft dat, met aandacht gedaan. Ja. Het is allemaal speel. Zoals in de Glasprince van Herman Hesse.
Zou je niet verwachten dat alle protestantse kerkmuziek in steenbok C-mineur gespeeld wordt?
Misschien wel. Het is een heel populaire toonsoort. En ik denk dat Martin Luther ook is een beetje gek over. Maar voor hem denk ik was meer D groot en G. En zo misschien wel de andere was C klein. Het is zo somber. Zo echt somber. Ja.
En er zit er echt helemaal geen systeem in. Ik denk, bijvoorbeeld als je Venus aan de hemel ziet, hè, die danst dus, en dat wordt dus die ster en de Goldschneider en alles. Is er nooit geprobeerd om, ik noem maar eens wat, als je nou de figuur van de Enneade hebt, of je die niet op een of andere manier toch een systeem in zou kunnen krijgen?
Ik weet het niet. Ik weet dat als je kijkt hier op mijn systeem, het heeft geen plan, er is geen order, het is alleen wat ik heb van de muziek zelf uitgehaald. Maar ik vind dat als je gaat in de andere richting en je zegt het zou zo zijn, dan kom je ook, het ook heeft geen zin. Zo ik zeg alleen, voor mij persoonlijk, het is zo, ik heb dat aan veel mensen verteld en zo, en ze vinden het interessant. Ik weet het niet. Het is geen waarheid, het is alleen een opmerking. Een klein gedacht dat ik heb. In droom, ik heb het gedroomd. Hè? Ik ben gedroomd, ik weet het niet.
Misschien ook.
Anything else you want to hear?
Ik had nog een beetje het gevoel bij Waterman. Toen hebt u gezegd, dat is joy. Terwijl ik meer het gevoel had, het is meer een soort volwassen vreugde en een soort triomf. Dus ja. Ik vind dat eigenlijk een beter woord dan joy.
Misschien wel. Ik heb het de key of joy genoemd, maar ook de key of triumph.
Ja, dat voel ik veel meer.
Echt iets van
het is een soort volwassen
overwinning.
Ja, een soort volwassen iets van, ik weet nu, ik ben een individu.
Precies, ik ben overtuigd, zoiets. Ja, ik ben het eens. Ja.
Goed, ik denk dat...
Ja, is dat genoeg? Ja.
Dat iedereen wel heel erg genoten heeft van deze lezing. Het was weer fantastisch, Gary.
Ja,
en wellicht hopen we je volgend jaar hier weer te zien. Hartelijk dank. Over 4 weken, weer de 3e vrijdag van de maand, is hier weer de kosmische ding. En dat gaat over reiki en magnetiseren en dergelijke. Hopelijk tot dan.
Oké.